right? And I think we do this a lot. We deal with these silences where we go home for the holidays or for whatever, and I think we all know, there's like a checklist in our head of like, don't talk about that, don't talk about that one. And what happens when that checklist are like, it's like parts of your identity, And I think we're made to like, well, it would be rude to like, don't, saddle, your grandmother with X or your old uncle with, how he gets. But I think the cost of that polite silence, I think it's too high.
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the voice to have.
Books really saved my life.
I've been interested in how you've been sort of talking about the tour itself as an opportunity for exchange of stories with your readers, and how that's that has a lot to do with how you thought of the book itself. In an interview, you described it as a conversation, as wanting to kind of welcome the reader into it rather than, I think the phrase you used yesterday on the social was an identity or trauma vacation.
Right.
So when you're talking about and sharing such personal material, how do you help shape the conversation around your work to make sure that it stays an exchange and doesn't just turn into that?
Well, I think every project is different. But with this, the title, How We Fight for Our Lives, before you have opened the book, I've said something to you about my intention, that this is about you too, and I do think we're all fighting for our lives, whether we know it or not. Daniel, the man that, he's fighting for his life as well, right? And his denial of that is what creates the danger, actually, as well as my denial. Like, I am delusional. Oh my gosh, you know what I mean? I think I'm so in control. I'm willing to go there about myself, but I think one thing was like setting the terms from the beginning, that everything you hear or read, I want you to go, either I identify with that or I don't, and then I want you to think about why. Yeah, and I think that's one of the ways we can do it. Because with Memoir, I don't know, I think sometimes, it can feel like people are just like trying on different people's skin, different people's identity, and just like, let me see what it's like to, and it's like, no, that was not my intention.
Yeah.
I wanted to make an artful, compelling offering to an existing conversation.
Yeah, and I think you've absolutely succeeded in
Thank you.
that. I feel like it's fitting to start by asking you about the tour and travel, because one of the things that we talked about and that comes across really strongly to me in your work is this tremendously vivid sense of place.
Yes.
It is a really tight organizational principle of this book. Every chapter is keyed to a specific city and certain locales like the forest or even the library where we find ourselves now are they are just, it's a very deliberately scene-driven sense of the way that this book is constructed. So I wanted to ask how this close and careful attention to place helped you build the story.
Yeah, one, place is just really important to me. Even with poems, I personally do not like the experience of reading a poem and it looks like just letters floating in white space, and that's how it feels. You're like, when is this taking place? What is the atmosphere? Or what, you know what I mean? Are we hot? Are we cold? Are we dirty? Are we sweating? So everything I write, I try to make it clear that we're grounded somewhere, right? So even, a college party is in some ways the most generic, but I want you to have a sense of what it's like to be in that space, that particular party in 2007. And then, the other thing I found is, memory is so deceptive. I think we rest a lot of our lives on false memories. The stories we tell about ourselves. And so for me, place I found to be one of the tools to check myself. So you see it, based on what I read tonight, it's like, okay, what would you be doing if you were at the kitchen in the party? Okay, well, I'd be getting a drink. There were Jell-O shots. Oh, okay, from standing at that point at the counter, I could see the DJ. Okay, so what would you do? Oh, I would be shouting songs. That's where the details are coming from. What would you do if you got tired of that? Oh, I would weave through and end up on the porch. What did you do out on the porch? You know what I mean? And so that's how, within reason, I tried to control the details, because as a poet, I'm like, ooh, this, poetry is just follow the sound, follow the image, and you don't know. But that's a dangerous impulse if you're writing the memoir. So for me, it was really about like, what would you be doing in this room? Where would you go next? You know, if you were in the living room in Louisville, Texas, and your mom was in her bedroom watching the TV, what would, you know, and so that's how I kind of kept myself on track.
Yeah, I feel it in your poetry as well, though, and like I think a lot of the same. In reading the two books, I felt like a lot of the same locales resurfaced. There's the forest in Prelude to Bruise is, you know.
That is very intentional. The forest that, if you've read the book, thank you. The forest that you see with me and Cody and Sam is the forest that appears in Prelude to Bruise.
Yeah. And there's a lot of sweating in the book, too.
It's hot.
It is always
It's hot. And I come from, on my mom's side, we just sweat. Sometimes I just feel like when my grandmother Mildred and I, we would joke, it was like sometimes it felt like it was the only thing we had in common. We just sweat a lot. But I love that. You know what I mean? Like that's a detail I look for in movies and TV shows, and I love when they get it right. If it's set in the South, and in the South I grew up in, I like seeing if they're catching the way we sweat there in Texas or in Tennessee, because it's different from how you would sweat elsewhere.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
I feel like it's unusual in just personal writing, too, to have that kind of granular attention to scene. It's something I associate with the work of, like, it really hit me when I was reading Alex Chee's essay collection.
Very good. Very good at that.
You know, in your work as well, just an uncommon sense of place. So thank you for that. The book also has, I mean, I'm glad we brought up the poetry collection because the book has a poet's affinity for economy of language. It's told in 21 chapters, it's a slim volume overall. And I'm interested in a comment that you made in an interview where you said, I think there's something special about having a book that is a tight jewel. It becomes something that people can experience and then pass on and get a great conversation going. So what role did that idea of sort of a compact conversational object play in the writing and structuring of the book?
I mean, I think maybe more broadly, part of it is rooted in that if you're, you know, not a straight, rich, cisgender man, everybody else we are all more aware of like earning our space and our time and our real estate. We just are slightly more, however you go along that continuum, you know what I mean? But, you know, coming from a tradition in poetry, I just, you know, I'm always having to earn a reader's time and attention. And, you know, I'm not judging, I'm not saying there's anyone here, you're all special, we're all special. But I think for a lot of people, and a lot of good, smart people, probably only read 2 books a year. And my sense is that chances are one of those books is going to be a classic, and the other one's probably going to be like a nonfiction book about politics lately. That's my sense. And I'm not going to ask people to choose how they use their time. That's between them and their conscience. But, you know, listen, between events today, I've been like, should I be following this impeachment thing? You know what I mean? So that is the culture in which books then come in. And it's a book about me, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I just really tried to think about how to earn and respect readers' time. And part of that was like, I'm not gonna write this is not gonna be what is it, My Struggle, book 16. There's not gonna be like a Marvel universe built out of how we fight for our life. You're not gonna hear Scorsese and everybody arguing about like the spin-offs of how we fight. Like I really wanted to keep the book tight and with purpose at every moment. And even to the point that I was nervous about it, but like opening the book with a poem that literally lays out in many ways the entire trajectory of the book. I let you know at the very beginning, like my mom was a lifelong smoker and she has a heart attack and she's going to die in the book. You need to understand this. So that in the first chapter, when I mention every day she gets home from work, she doesn't even want to talk until she has that cigarette because it's how she dealt with stress as a single mom working 2 jobs. That's not just color, right? Because you've read the poem, you go, oh, this matters, you know? And so I was just trying to do that. And I don't know, I think a lot more writers, and it's not just men, but it's usually men, and their editors, especially when they become famous, they start writing these big bloated books that I think that you're wasting my time, you know? And my time's valuable, it is. And so is yours, you know? So I just really tried to follow through on that.
Cool.
Yeah.
How did you decide on kind of the size of the units by which the book would move? Was it?
That I didn't know.
Yeah.
That was really organic. The book was going to be even shorter, by the way.
Oh.
My editor, we decided to expand the book to follow through on the totality of my mom's story,
Okay.
you know. So the entire last act of the book was not going to be there.
Wow.
But yeah, it was just organic. You know, I think, and I'm like this with my poems. I know I finished a poem when I write something that makes me go, oh my. Well, you know what I mean? So that like, I might as well make a weapon out of myself. Well, I was like, line break, bitch.
Yeah.
We done did that. You know what I mean? Like, that was the end of my writing day that day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, because, you know, again, it's like, you know when you did the damn thing. And to me, you know, the response is those moments you have, you know, when you're reading work. I think writers need to pay attention to that as well when they're creating it. And so, yeah, I try to pay attention to it. And, you know, like Yusef Komunyakaa said that the ear is a wonderful editor. And yeah, so I read everything out loud. As I was writing, I read every sentence of it out loud, you know. Anytime I basically had more than 2 paragraphs, once I felt confident enough, I would start reading and then go back and revise.
That's amazing. And I love the sort of like the mic drop theory of editing yourself, because I feel like the common story is you know, or common advice is sort of, you know, you write till you feel good and then you like push yourself into the next sentence or the next paragraph so you have somewhere to start the next day, you get a rolling start. But this like...
I mean, that is why you find a good editor.
Yeah.
You know, and I was tremendously fortunate to find my editor in Simon & Schuster. He's now at Macmillan, John Cox. Oh, what a joke. My editor ended up being a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, straight white man from Connecticut.
Ooh.
Go figure. A lesson for us all, you know. But he's a good listener, which most of those men are not. And he was great, so we developed trust. So that was the other thing, that I could have my like, ooh, I did it, and then send it to him. And I sent the book in very small sections. Because I was like, I'm not going to do this thing where you don't hear from me for 6 months, and then I turn in like 150 pages, and then wait 6 more months. No. I was texting him. You know, with that paragraph that leads to the goddamn everyman, I texted it to him.
Oh my
and I was like,
God.
we gonna be fighting for our lives. You try to take this out the book. You know, so it was a real collaborative dynamic. He's wonderful. I mean, I was texting him as recently as a few hours ago.
Yeah.
You know, because I want to now share the joy that he has helped me create. But, you know, I trusted that I could do what I do, and he would let me know, and I would have another opportunity, so many opportunities to edit, and then copy edit, and then proofread the book. And he would always just let me know. If he was like, I'll tell you when it's actually the last time.
That is good.
Yeah, which will probably be tomorrow. We'll see.
Yeah, that's okay. So this exchange, this conversational, communicative process is in the DNA of the book.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, I think sometimes people are thrown by me understanding the fact of my value. I think sometimes people are thrown when I'm like, I understand that I'm an excellent writer. And I don't think that's arrogance. I think it's factual because I'm a reader first, you know, and I understand what's going on. I don't think I'm the only one. I think I'm one of many. I think I'm one of legion. But it's a balance between understanding your value and understanding the value of a brilliant creative partner. You know, and that was true for my agent who was looking at the book before I submitted it. And then, you know, your editor. You can't work with people if you don't trust them to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate to find an editor that I felt that way. And then it was like, let's go, you know?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned so much from just how good you are at knowing your own sense of value. Like even your website bio.
Oh.
Can I quote it from memory?
You memorized it?
It's just so
Go
memorable.
on.
Saeed Jones is that bitch.
Hey.
He has written 2 books, both of which are excellent. And then it says go read them?
Yeah, and then there's the links. To be fair, I was stoned on the couch
But you kept it
with my best friend who's a web designer, and I was like, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I will forever remember the moment I saw Toni Morrison on a YouTube clip in conversation with Charlie Rose, and and he was just lucky to be there, and he complimented her at one point. And then, you know, I saw Toni Morrison in person in New York 3 times. Tremendous fortune to see her 3 times while I was living in New York City. And people would compliment her, and that was the first time I saw it, but it wasn't the last. And they would just go on and on and on and on. And sometimes she would say thank you, but often she would just And the silence, like the way she could like do that and hold her breath. And as someone who, I have these moments of bravado and then I feel myself rushing to try to like, but also thank you, you know, she didn't do that. She just went, you know, it was like saying, Toni Morrison, it's November. And she's just like, you know, and I think as a reader, as a future writer, as a gay black boy in America, oh my God, to see an older black woman fully own her brilliance and the significance of her brilliance. She didn't keep it to herself, she was sharing it with all of us. You know what I mean? Mexico loves Toni Morrison. Did y'all know that? If you watch the documentary about her, watch pieces of Mexico loves Toni Morrison. You know what I mean? So she made a global contribution. And I think she understood that it was a disservice to shrink from that, you know, to do this thing that we all so often do, which is try to comfort people at cost to our self-respect.
Yeah, and I feel like we don't see, like, it's tremendously and like inspiringly political to be like, here I am, I'm a black writer, I am a fucking master craftsman.
I mean, listen, this will be, probably not, but let's pretend that this is the only time I'll mention the 2020 presidential election in the United States. Let's just pretend. It is still radical for any of the women currently running for the Democratic nomination to get on stage and say, I am qualified, period. That is a radical statement. They say that, thank you. They show up and people are like, how dare you? How dare you? You know, how dare you even think you should be in this space, much less just say it? How dare you read a line from your resume, you know, Kamala or Elizabeth Warren or Amy Klobuchar or, you know, how dare you? So, you know, we see this, and I've been thinking a lot about what we can learn from joy and praise, because it's not a space where I think we have a very vibrant public conversation about what we can learn from it.
Yeah, so thank you for contributing to that.
See, I still was like,
I'm now very sort of self-conscious that I've been complimenting you a lot.
It's a journey, we'll get there together.
I mean, I'm not gonna suddenly start, you know, hurling insults. Okay.
Trash.
No. Okay, so we're talking about place. We're talking about how kind of intimately known and mapped the book is. In contrast to that, there are a lot of scenes of you in your youth trying to understand your own queerness without having the words to name it.
Right.
And there are so many people around you who are, as you say, hurling words at you, trying to name what is having its way with you. And there are so many instantiations of just like failed naming. You're called this, you're called this, your grandmother calls you worldly, the boys you hang out with call you a homophobic slur. I'm just interested in this pattern of failed naming as it kind of frustrated the process of coming to self-knowledge, and why you kind of chose to use that as a figure that kept coming up.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think Toni Morrison, in part, the way she uses names and throughout her work, I think is interesting and drew my attention to it. That the failing of names and the way names kind of become curses or burdens or destinies. You know, Saeed, and it depends on who you ask, depending on, you know, where in the world they're coming from. But, you know, Saeed in Arabic, you know, it means happy and fortunate. Happy could mean gay. You know, it means good news. It means like the leader bringing it. It has all these, but a very positive, you know, connotation. And when I've struggled with depression, as I have, you know, one of the insults that I hurl at myself is like I'm not living up to my own name. So I think about that a lot, and the fact that we name kids often with great meaning before we've met them, right? We don't know anything about these children except they came from us, and here we are, like, here's the name I'm giving you, you know, and then here's the blue or the pink blanket, you know, it all just snowballs really quickly. And so I wanted to capture the experience that I think young people still have. I think young people often just feel like that we're just yelling at them constantly. You know, I think young people, especially young people who are really curious about the world, often feel they're just surrounded by these tall people who are just like
it's like the
dictating.
Peanuts cartoon.
Yeah, wah, wah, yeah, totally. And that was a lot just anyway, you know, especially like from loved ones. And so I'm interested in how we can try to love people and do loving things and it can still be hurtful. And certainly how strangers, like a pastor emerges in the book and you see how little he knows about me.
Yeah.
And then he just does something just life-changing, from my grandmother, my mother, and I, knowing so little. So I think that's interesting. And maybe it's my way of engaging a conversation about stereotypes or whatever. But I didn't want to do that in a didactic way.
Yeah.
So I thought it was just helpful to kind of ground things in my own experiences.
Yeah. A passage that that is very powerful and comes up a lot that I've noticed comes up a lot in interviews and press for this book is the line about how there should be 100 words for the way that a black boy can lie awake at night. And there aren't, but what there are instead are just there are 100 different things that you are called that you are
All
not.
kinds of slurs.
Yeah. And I guess too, like why I was interested in that moment is because the people around you, the objects around you, like the Baldwin novel, like the photograph of your mother's friend, they seem to have a kind of knowledge that you can't quite access yet. And I just...
Yeah, I mean, listen, like when I say like I did the best I could with what I did feel I earned that line because you see, I'm definitely trying to I'm going to the library. It's like holding on to like the tail of my mom's dress, like asking her questions. I'm running into hookups and relationships because sex is fun and I deserve, but also because at the time that I was growing up, like 1998, was when I turned 12, and so all of this, marriage equality doesn't exist, was never going to happen. It was never going to happen. Sodomy, sex between two men, was illegal technically in the state of Texas where I grew up until I was a junior in high school when it was, shut down by a Supreme Court decision. That's Lawrence v. Texas. And I knew that, So when you're seeing all of this, and there wasn't, Pose and Moonlight and Lena Waithe and Jan, all of these things now, and these people who have visibility, that was not happening. Will and Grace premiered that year, and Queer as Folk. And again, shows about white, upper middle class men, people, mostly in the East Coast. And Will and Grace, think about the racism that was a part of that show with Karen's Latina maid. Every time she's on screen, there's a racist joke about her. So even the show where I was like, gay people, it was like, oh, I don't like that. And it was a big deal because in Texas, I understood racism through the context of hearing how everyone was talking about the Mexicans, plural. So it was deeply painful, even in the show that was supposed to give me hope. So I say all this to say that even sex, even hooking up with a hot dad in the public restroom at the Louisville Public Library, multi-purpose space, was, among all the other things it was, an attempt just to find someone else who knew something about me that I was trying to figure out. Yeah.
Can we talk about the library?
Let us!
Yeah. There are only so many locations in this book, but the library comes up many
Twice?
times.
2 or 3 times?
I think at least 3 times. It's where you go as a young man to try and find information about being gay.
Right.
It is where you have the hookup with the hot dad. And later when you're in college, it's a kind of refuge for you.
Oh my goodness, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I start hiding in my college library in the stacks.
And doing like really deep formative reading. So what place does the space hold for you?
I think, and the reason I refuse to, as Tony Cade Bombera said, like, do not leave the arena to the fools. These public spaces are so important. Oh my God. Imperfect as my experience was, particularly early in the book, when you see me go and I find like sociological books about homosexuality, and they were all about HIV/AIDS. They were all out of date, and they scared the hell out of me and put truly the fear of death in me, which was not fair and not deserved. But it was a place I could go. I went back. You're right, I spent so much time at the library. I don't even include that usually in high school, I would get to school early for almost all 4 years of high school, and about an hour early before the morning extracurricular activities, because clubs would meet, just to be in the library. I just think it's, for me, it was a comforting space. No one ever asked, as a young black man, no one ever said, what are you doing here? I never felt that, I wasn't being followed around by a security guard, which would happen at the mall, for example, where other teenagers felt comfortable killing time. The library was my space, and there was just so much. And so I loved it. And I just, we have to fight for these spaces, y'all. And I know you know that. It's just important to me, to the point that in some ways I take it for granted, but I just think an interesting thing about representation, we're really focused on TV and film. But there's such a radical tradition in book publishing, and I think another country was an example of me finding this book that was, for its time, incredibly transgressive and just like light years ahead of every other form of media I found at the time. I mean, just to be a 12-year-old boy in the suburbs in Texas in 1998 and read this book where Rufus is having sex with white women, I was like, oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, where my grandmother, when I was a little kid, she would get mad at me even befriending white girls at school because she would say, you've got to beware of their fathers. Oh, gosh. That's what kindergarten, by the way. That's what I grew up, so seeing interracial relationships was like, whoa, wow. And then he has sex with men, and I was like, whoa! And then he's having sex with women again, and I was like, what is going on? Because I didn't know what bisexuality was, but it just that, forget the plot, forget the language, just the existence of people living lives that until then felt like were written in invisible ink or something, was really powerful. And libraries, and my mom's home library, right, are just really important, to young people, especially to kids who I think were like me, where, I was so afraid, like I said earlier, of messing up. Yeah. And I was afraid to go to talk to adults and to ask for questions. But, even my grandmother, for all of her rigor, and how she raised me, she would just let me go at the library. Yeah. We'd go in and she would go one way and I would go the other, and I could pick up the Bears team, but all of that, I loved it. And that for kids, I think is incredibly powerful. Those first few moments of, I got this because I found it and I want it, Yeah.
Just, you mentioned the sort of difficulty of asking questions, of kind of open communication. There was a line in your NPR Fresh Air interview, which is a great interview.
Thank you. Shout out to my girl, Terry.
You guys had such great chemistry. But you described the kinds of moments that you're interested in as a writer, and I thought this was really fascinating. Moments when people are making their best effort, but there's still miscommunication. And I feel like we see a lot of really moving instances of that in this book between you and your mom. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always, for 6 years I worked at BuzzFeed News as an editor, LGBT editor, executive culture editor, and then I was hosting a morning show. So I was just seeing, books, but also just narratives and kind of getting a sense of what is well covered and what isn't. And what I realize is that we don't have enough. There certainly are examples, but we don't have enough of examples of books that spend time with the more subtle spaces in our relationships, like loving, generally healthy relationships. This isn't a book where, I come out to my mom and I'm kicked out of my house. For example, that's huge. This isn't a family of physical violence, that kind of abuse. You know what I mean? It's generally really warm. My mom and I have a great relationship in many regards, except for this one thing. And so, what does it mean? When there's a more subtle hurt. And really I use the metaphor of silence as this silence amidst all the other wonderful music and noise of your relationship with the person, that silence kind of metastasizes. And so I was interested in that. Like, what does it mean when people are doing their best? My mom, I think, was a good mom, she was warm, she would ask me questions. One day we were, and this is just to underscore how open we were in many other regards. Once I was in high school, she was driving, we got to a red light, stopped her, and we were listening to music on the radio, and she stopped at the red light, and she just turned to me, we were silent, and she just said, "Do you masturbate?" You should. And then the light turned green, and she just drove off. And I mean, she might as well have kicked me out of the car. I was like, what?
A legend.
That was it, a legend. So that's just an example of kind of our candor and our kind of contemporary, but queerness, my being gay. Even when I came out to her, she just couldn't do it, right? And so what does it mean when the same woman who can have that kind of moment can't handle, her son who's, I don't know, a sophomore or junior in college, at university, sorry. And she freezes up when I try to bring up my boyfriend's brother. I don't even bring up my boyfriend, just his brother, to try to kind of bring in, and it was like deer in headlights. Yeah. And so I was just interested in that because I think that's something, Thanksgiving's coming up in the U.S., in the holidays, right? And I think we do this a lot. We deal with these silences where we go home for the holidays or for whatever, and I think we all know, there's like a checklist in our head of like, don't talk about that, don't talk about that one. And what happens when that checklist are like, it's like parts of your identity, And I think we're made to like, well, it would be rude to like, don't, saddle, your grandmother with X or your old uncle with, how he gets. But I think the cost of that polite silence, I think it's too high because we see that the dynamics, the questions, the harm that we are often experiencing in real time, that doesn't pause for the holidays. So why should we?
Yeah. I'm just listening to you now, so struck by when you said that there were sort of gaps in loving relationships that you felt weren't addressed, or when you were talking about how people have so many demands on their time, so they're, this is the kind of story I'm going to tell about myself to put into the world. Just the depth of ethical thought that went into putting this book into the world.
Thank you.
That's tremendous. Yeah, I suspect that is uncommon.
I mean, maybe it's an uncommon time, right? Yeah. I mean, it's really not for nothing that the entire time I was writing this book, from the time I was editing the early drafts that became proposal and then sold it and then was writing to its completion, I was in a newsroom, surrounded by and editing and working with other editors and wonderful reporters. That was just always happening. And then 2016 happened, and I mean, we're seeing the destabilization of people's and is it the truth and fake, all of this, and I was just seeing even when you do your job. If people don't like it, many people will just assume it's fake or a lie, So it was like, gosh, yikes. So I felt just in that space, rather than feeling scared, I just wanted to really speak to it and really do the best I could to document the truth as I experienced it. And again, and that is why, I say, memory is such an unreliable narrator. It just is, right? Those lies. And so that's why, with my grandmother, for example, at the church, there's a tremendously important scene. Oh my gosh, so traumatic and life-changing. And then I'm like, I don't remember what happened next. And then I'm like, and then we're in the car. You know what I mean? And my goodness, as a writer, it drives me crazy that I can't remember what happened from the moment we walked off the pulpit in that church and into the parking lot. I don't know, 10 minutes maybe? I don't know what happened, and gosh, I sure would like to. Yeah. But, I felt that it was more important to go, I don't know, and to tell that to the reader so that they understand that what I am telling you, I am really confident in, and I do that with my mom a few times too. Yeah, so I don't know. It's just how I figured out how to tell this story. But I hope and I trust that I think any writer right now worth their salt is thoughtfully interrogating themselves. Yeah. Because I see it's really easy to lie. You could be writing just really quickly, trying to meet a deadline, and you just and you haven't given yourself time for a memory to come. As me, often I'm asleep. You know what I mean? Or I'm in the shower and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, that happened there, not there. Or a powerful, there's a moment where I remember years before my grandmother told me to stop holding my books like a girl. Right. My library books like a girl. And I said something sarcastic to her and she backhanded me. And I'd forgot about it. I had written about it. I wrote about it in essay form for BuzzFeed years ago and forgot about it. And only when I was writing the Memphis 1999 section did it come back to me, because I had time. And so write slow. My theory is James Frey is a real fast writer.
Ooh,
clacking, click clacking.
Yeah. Okay, we have amazingly, like incredibly 5 minutes.
Okay.
Which just like, yeah.
This all happened.
I want to ask you about Ohio. I know everybody asks you. You recently moved from New York to Columbus, Ohio, the land of tall, big-bootied, corn-fed men.
They are so tall and so big booty.
I'm curious to ask about it as part of just your trajectory as a writer. You were working at BuzzFeed.
Yep.
You went from an MFA program to an NYC media job. And
Taught high school in between then too.
right. And now that you've moved to Ohio, you've said that all you have to do is live and write.
Because I can afford that.
How has that changed your identity as a writer?
Ooh, yeah. Well, it's new. I mean, I moved there in September. I visited last October for work. I was doing a road trip series with the morning show I was hosting for BuzzFeed News, and I just went. And I think I don't. All I know, I went back and I was like, what was going on? And I realized right before that trip was Dr. Christine Blasey Ford's testimony. Shook me. Really did. I see the word indelible in print and my eyes start stinging. It was a moment where for everything that has happened, I just think something broke.
Yeah.
And I said, what has been working until this point is no longer working. And because I've struggled with depression and really struggled with mental health, as so many of us are, and realizing that I could now afford, financially, because of where my career is, I knew that it wasn't like people were gonna stop publishing my work because I wasn't living in New York City. I could afford to move. I've traveled, I've circled the globe. In 2012, it's just, you see it at the end, but after my mom passed away, I traveled by myself for 8 months and circled the globe because I was like, I gotta reintroduce myself to this world without her, So having done all of that, I ended up in Columbus, Ohio, and I didn't go there looking for a new home, but I found it. And it was just everything lined up. And so, I don't know, one, I think it is always powerful when you feel your intuition, you respond to your intuition, and then you are given the gift of time to see, damn it, you were right. Isn't that a powerful moment? And I know, right, people are nodding because what that's like. And then you're like, I'll do it again. So I think as a writer, which is all about risk-taking and poetry in particular, I think that dynamic, the intuition, following through and being confirmed, it empowers everything because I think I'm on to something. And so, yeah, it's the economics are great. It's nice. The guys are hot. Grindr's lit. But just beyond that, I feel so self-confident in my ability to make decisions about what's working for me. And that's true for all kinds of things. But of course, as I try to figure out what I want to do next, I'm writing poems. That is why I'm writing more than I have in years, honestly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is tremendously powerful.
Tink you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tajja. Oh my God, my queen. I know you have questions, but can we applause her as well?
Oh, God, thank you. Thank you.